Remember that odd feeling, like you've stepped into a time warp twice a year? That's daylight saving time, or DST. It's that peculiar practice of shifting our clocks forward in the spring forward, and back in the fall back. We do this all in the name of maximizing daylight hours during our waking hours. It's a bit of a societal agreement to trick ourselves into being more productive. But who decides when we mess with time? And why do we even bother? Contrary to popular belief, it's not some eccentric clockmaker in a secluded tower who gets to dictate when we spring forward or fall back. The idea of a lone figure tinkering with time is a romantic notion, but the reality is far more complex and involves a lot more people. The power to determine daylight saving time, or DST, actually rests with governments and international organizations. These entities deliberate and decide on the best times to adjust our clocks, taking into account various factors such as energy consumption, economic impact, and even public health. Think of it like this. Time zones are lines drawn on a map, and someone has to decide who draws those lines and when to tweak them. These decisions are not arbitrary. They are based on scientific research, historical data, and sometimes even political considerations. The goal is to make the most efficient use of daylight and to harmonize timekeeping across regions. In the United States, the Department of Transportation is the keeper of the clock, so to speak. This federal agency is responsible for overseeing the implementation of DST. They work closely with other governmental bodies and experts to ensure that the transition is smooth and that the benefits of DST are maximized. They determine the start and end dates for DST nationwide. This involves meticulous planning and coordination, as well as public communication to ensure everyone is aware of the changes. So the next time you adjust your clock, remember that it's the result of a well-orchestrated effort by many people working behind the scenes. The rationale behind DST is pretty straightforward. Make the most of daylight, particularly during those productive morning hours. The idea is to align our waking hours more closely with the natural light, thereby maximizing our productivity and well-being. By shifting the clock forward, we essentially steal an hour of daylight from the evening and tack it onto the morning. This shift is intended to reduce the need for artificial lighting and heating, especially during the early part of the day when people are most active. This, proponents argue, leads to energy savings, as people rely less on artificial lighting. The reduction in energy consumption is seen as a significant benefit, especially in an era where energy efficiency is a global priority. Plus, who doesn't love an extra hour of evening sunshine? Longer evenings mean more time for outdoor activities, socializing, and enjoying nature, which can improve mental health and community well-being. However, DST isn't without its critics. Many people find the biannual clock changes to be disruptive and confusing. Some argue that the energy savings are negligible and that the time change can disrupt sleep patterns, leading to health issues. Studies have shown that the sudden shift in time can affect our circadian rhythms, causing sleep deprivation, which in turn can lead to a host of health problems such as increased stress, mood swings, and even a higher risk of heart disease. Critics also point out that the supposed benefits of DST may not be as significant as once thought, especially with modern advancements in energy-efficient technologies. While the majority of the United States observes DST, there are a couple of holdouts. Hawaii, with its tropical location and relatively consistent daylight hours year-round, opted out of DST. Most of Arizona also chooses to remain on Mountain Standard Time, citing the intense summer heat and a desire to avoid even more scorching daylight hours. Section 5. A World of Difference DST around the globe. Daylight saving time, or DST, is a practice that has been adopted by many countries around the world, but not all. The concept of shifting the clock forward by an hour during the warmer months to extend evening daylight is both celebrated and criticized globally. The United States isn't alone in its time-bending ways. In fact, it is one of the many countries that have embraced this practice to make better use of daylight during the longer days of summer. The idea is to save energy, reduce traffic accidents, and provide more daylight for outdoor activities. Many countries around the world observe daylight saving time, particularly in North America and Europe. Canada, most European Union nations, and even some parts of Mexico participate in this annual clock shift. In Europe, the entire continent synchronizes its clocks, making it easier for travel and business across borders. In South America, countries like Brazil and Chile also partake in the annual clock shift, although the practice is not as widespread as in North America and Europe. The reasons for adopting DST vary, from energy conservation to aligning with international business hours. However, there are plenty of countries that have no interest in messing with Mother Nature's clock. Most African nations, many Asian countries, and countries near the equator generally don't see the need for daylight saving time. The closer you are to the equator, the more consistent the daylight hours are throughout the year. In these regions, the amount of daylight remains relatively stable, making the concept of shifting the clock somewhat redundant. Countries like India, China, and Japan have opted out of DST, choosing instead to keep their clocks consistent year-round. As their daylight hours remain relatively consistent throughout the year, the need for daylight saving time is minimal. This global patchwork of timekeeping practices highlights the diverse ways in which different cultures and regions interact with the natural rhythms of the Earth. Section 6. The Great Time Debate: to DST or not to DST. The practice of daylight saving time has been a topic of debate for decades. Proponents point to the potential energy savings, reduced traffic accidents, and economic benefits. They argue that DST simply makes sense in a modern, industrialized world. Opponents, however, counter that the energy savings are minimal, and the health and safety risks associated with disrupted sleep patterns outweigh any perceived benefits. They advocate for a fixed, year-round time system. Section 7. Beyond the clock: the human element of time change. Perhaps the most intriguing aspect of daylight saving time is how it highlights our complex relationship with time itself. We attempt to impose artificial order on something as fundamental as the Earth's rotation. The twice-yearly time change can feel like a collective societal jet lag, with some adapting seamlessly while others struggle to adjust. It raises questions about our ability to control time and the unintended consequences of our manipulations. Section 8. DST in the digital age. Still relevant? In our increasingly digital world, with remote work and global communication blurring traditional boundaries, the relevance of daylight saving time has been called into question. Some argue that standardized time zones are becoming less critical in a world where connectivity reigns supreme. Others maintain that DST still serves a valuable purpose, providing structure and predictability in our daily lives. Section 9. A glimpse into the future of time. So, what does the future hold for daylight saving time? Will we continue to spring forward and fall back like clockwork, or will we eventually abandon this grand temporal experiment? As technology advances and our understanding of sleep, productivity, and energy consumption evolves, it's possible that the way we think about time itself will undergo a fundamental shift. Perhaps one day, the concept of DST will seem as antiquated as sundials and hourglasses. Only time will tell.